Hello and welcome. So today it is all about the latest release from Matiere Premier, and this one is Vanilla Powder. Now this fragrance was kindly sent to me by the Twisted Lily team, and it was launched maybe a little bit over a month ago. I have had it here for several weeks, so I've had the opportunity to really use this fragrance and form my thoughts about what I really think about this fragrance overall. So today I'm going to give you a detailed review. I'm also going to be comparing it to the original, which I absolutely love, and I'm going to be rating it for you. Now, this is a fragrance that has its own cult following, and the questions have been, is this really worth it? Did we really need this? Is it worth the hype? Is it better than the original? And I will be answering all of those questions for you today. But let's go ahead and jump right in. But if this is your first time here, I'm Arahi, and I'm your fragrance concierge because I'm totally committed to creating the best fragrance experience for you. I upload videos multiple times a week, and on this channel, we love to talk about all types of fragrances. So if that sounds like the type of content that you're interested in and like a good plan, then please consider subscribing, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget, leave a comment. Let's go. So as I mentioned in the opening, Vanilla Powder, the original, is a fragrance that, I will be comparing it for you towards the end of the video, but I do want to let you know that this is definitely a fragrance that has a cult following. But this is kind of like a controversial kind of fragrance in my opinion. To me, it is not polarizing. But there are some fan members that really did not enjoy the original whatsoever. They found it to be screechy, and we'll talk more about that when I compare them both. But this one is coming in, and I think that we're still having very similar questions as to those that we had with the OG. So this is a fragrance that does open very vanillic and sweet. But immediately for me, the sweetness, the level of sweetness that I find in this one is not the same level of sweetness that I find in the original. But the fragrance inevitably does open vanillic and sweet and immediately powdery. Now, the thing about the powderiness in the extrait is that it is more around the coconut. For me, it's like a powderiness, if this even makes sense, that comes from like a flaky coconut. The coconut to me is very present here. Compared to the OG, it is definitely present, and the powderiness for me is coming more from the coconut than anything else. Now, in the opening, do I pick up the scent of coconut? No, not really. The opening to me is all about that very vanillic, a little bit sweet and powdery scent. Now, as the journey continues, you are going to pick up on kind of like a dry coconut, again, kind of like flaky to me, and it comes together very nicely with that powderiness. So for me, that powderiness is really coming from like a kind of roasted, kind of flaky kind of coconut. That's the only way that I can explain it. But I also want to let you know, in case you're wondering, that even though the fragrance opens up vanillic and sweet, not very sweet, just sweet, and with that powderiness, it also is a bit airy, which I find rather interesting because I'm really not seeing any citrusy notes disclosed within the note structure, but the opening is not citrusy. It is a bit airy. So even though you are going to get that powderiness and that present vanilla, there is a certain degree of airiness that I pick up in the opening of this fragrance. Now, as you approach the dry down, you are going to be introduced to a very dominant, yes, dominant note of tonka bean. The tonka bean here plays a critical role. It is very, very present to the point of dominant. Will it be dominant at the dry down? No. But approaching the dry down, oh, the tonka bean becomes the star right along with the vanilla and that powderiness, because the vanilla will be the star of the fragrance regardless, right along with that powderiness. But for a minute there, you are going to get that very, very present tonka. As you get closer and closer to the dry down, you are going to find that that powdery coconut that you picked up all the way from like kind of the opening of the fragrance until the dry down, it does become a bit like faint. Not completely gone, but it takes like a backseat, allowing the tonka, the vanilla, and that powderiness to have like center stage, but the coconut is still present. Now the powdery that I'm picking up as you approach the dry down is not as coconutty, to call it something, as what I was picking up midway in the olfactory journey. Now at the dry down, you are going to get a beautiful, for me, it is an exquisitely beautiful, not necessarily smelling like food, but there's like a yumminess. There's an inherent yumminess to the scent of this fragrance. And I also picked that up in the OG, but at the dry down, you are going to get a very creamy vanillic scent that has some woodiness to it. It is quite powdery. The tonka is present, but no longer dominant, but you're definitely going to pick up on the tonka. But the most important part that I have to share with you is that that dry down is a dry down that is really, really shaped, right, by a very present musk. And the musk is a level 3 to 4, so it's not like a demure or a faint musk. It is a musk that is very, very present and that will play a critical role in the scent at the dry down and throughout the entire wear of the fragrance. That has got to be one of the most critical differences between this fragrance and the original, but we'll talk more about it in a minute. Now, I will say that even though we do have, you know, differences here and there, which I am so looking forward to speaking to the differences, because I must tell you that I did not expect to find what I found in this fragrance. That is why it took me so long to circle back with you and come and give you this detailed review, because when I first tried the fragrance on skin and on paper, I started to notice some of the differences that I'm going to share with you. And I just expected this to be a bit more of a robust version of the original with, you know, minor differences here and there. But this one, it's not a completely different fragrance. Don't get me wrong. It's the exact same DNA. And you're going to get pretty much the same vibe and kind of like the same scent, but there are considerable differences here. I think that this is a fragrance that is suitable for all ages, for any occasions, for any season of the year, day and or night. This is definitely a scent that you could make your signature scent. But for me, you know, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but for me, like the original would be like my daytime version. And this one would be reserved like for special occasions or special events, not necessarily formal events, but just like special occasions, because this one is definitely a smoother version than the original. Where the original had a certain degree of screechiness that really was a turnoff for most, this one is very, very smooth. But at that, there are differences in the scent. But overall, I think that this is a very versatile fragrance that will get you through any season of the year, any occasion, day or night, and it performs beautifully because you are going to get a little bit over the 8-hour mark without having to overspray or respray. It does have a moderate projection, but it does have a very, very good sillage. So the performance is very much on point, but it is definitely a fragrance that once you spray it, it will give you like a strong projection during the first, I would say 90 minutes, no more than that. But after that, it becomes a scent bubble, and that scent bubble will carry you through almost the entire wear of the fragrance, because it's not until very much like the last hour of wear, maybe hour 8 or 9, that for me on my skin and on paper, this becomes a skin scent, a very intimate skin scent. But before that, it is a scent bubble all day long. So the performance is really, really special on this one. All right, so now let's have ourselves a good conversation, and I am making sure that my little fingerprints are not all over the fragrance. And this is a black bottle, so it picks up like a little bit of dust. But anyway, so let's talk about these two fragrances. So let's start by talking about the EDP, Eau de Parfum, versus the Extrait. So there seems to be the misperception or the myth or the misunderstanding that when you have an extrait of another fragrance, the extrait is automatically going to be a more intense version of the original. Like that you're going to get the exact same fragrance, but much more intense than that you get in the Eau de Parfum. Now, in the Eau de Parfum, we are talking about 15 to 20% oil concentration. In the extrait, you're talking about 20 to 40 or even greater, oil concentration. So yeah, there are differences in that intensity. But typically, when a perfumer, develops and launches an extrait, there are sometimes negligible differences, or at times they just choose to reformulate, kind of like reformulate the composition of the fragrance to enhance or highlight certain notes, accords, and even tonalities that did not exist in the original. And I have to tell you that in the case of these two, that is exactly what we have. Because what we have is that in this fragrance, in the extrait, we will notice an enhancement, like some of the notes have definitely been magnified compared to the original. And some notes have been removed and other notes have been added. So as we talk about the differences between these two, I do want you to keep that in mind. The other thing that I want to make sure that you keep in mind is that when we're talking about the Eau de Parfum, typically in the Eau de Parfum, the focus is around the heart notes due to its 15 to 20% oil concentration. Because what that means is that the fragrance will tend to evaporate faster, right? Or become a bit demure, and like an intimate scent will become faster than that you find in the extrait. The extraits tend to focus more on the base notes due to their ability to have a longer performance, right, when it comes to that scent, because you're talking about a 20 to 40% oil concentration in the extrait versus the 15 to 20 in the Eau de Parfum. So that is also something that you find here clearly. While we focused on the heart notes in the Eau de Parfum, we are definitely focusing on the base notes in the extrait. So first and foremost, to my nose and on paper, the extrait opens up less powdery and definitely less sweet than the original. The original version, the Eau de Parfum, definitely opened sweet. Not very, very sweet, not sickly sweet, but definitely sweeter than the extrait. And the level of powderiness in the opening of the original is definitely much more intense than that you find in the extrait. So many fam members did report that they found the original. They did not like the original because they found the original to be screechy. And not a bit screechy, very screechy. And I can see how that would have been the case because of the level of powderiness that you find in the original. Now, as I just said before, you are not going to find that level of powderiness in the extrait. And when it comes to specifically to the powderiness, I think that the key, the one note that plays a key role between these two is the note of heliotrope, because you are going to find heliotrope in the original, but you're not going to find it in the extrait. And I think that the driver of that very prominent presence of powderiness in the original is due to the fact that you have the note of heliotrope. Now let's talk about notes that play a key role in the extrait and that you need to be very much aware of. So first and foremost, they have added the note of tonka bean, and the tonka is very, very present, bordering on dominant, as I explained to you when I did the olfactory journey. The tonka is not present in the opening. It's more like around midway in the olfactory journey. As you approach the dry down, the tonka makes its appearance, and it's a very, very strong and present tonka that will be there until the dry down. At the dry down, the tonka does smooth out, but then it gives way to yet another note that I need you to be aware as it relates to the extrait compared to the OG, and that is the note of musk. The musk in the extrait is quite present and very much dominant at the dry down, right along with the vanilla and the powderiness. It is a musk to the tune of a level 3 to 4, more of a 4, and it is an unapologetic musk presence. It's not really animalic. I don't pick it up as animalic, but it is definitely a musk that makes me warn you and let you know that if you're not into musk-based fragrances, then the extrait for sure may not be for you. And then another note in the last one that really created a difference between these two is the note of coconut. The coconut, to my nose and on paper, is more present, has been magnified or intensified in the extrait versus the OG. In the OG, you are going to pick up the coconut, but to a certain extent. But in the extrait, you are going to pick up the coconut. The coconut will be present from the opening of the fragrance. And then at the dry down, it does become faint. And then it's not that it disappears, but it remains pretty much faint. But until that point, the coconut does play a very, very important role. So in summary, and before I jump into answering some of the questions that I'm sure you're going to have for me, I would say that the extrait is a very solid release, but the extrait comes in with a smoother version of the original. And while it is a smoother version, it is not the exact same fragrance because we find certain notes such as musk, tonka bean, the absence of the heliotrope, and definitely a more intense version of the coconut. Those four differences do make quite the difference between these two, especially when it comes to the wear of the fragrance. But overall, I think that this is a very nice and solid release. And let's talk more about how you may feel when you compare, or if you were a lover of this one, how you may feel now with the extrait. So now let's answer some of the questions that you may have. The first question may be, is it redundant to pick up this one if you have the OG? To me, it is not redundant because, as I've explained, they are not the exact same fragrance. And most importantly, one for me would be designed to use for certain occasions and times of the day, and the other one for certain occasions, right? While the OG you can wear anytime, any time of the day for any occasion. Yes, absolutely you can. The smoothness of this one speaks to me to a bit more of an air of elegance and sophistication, sensuality. There is just a different vibe to this one because of its smoothness. To me, the original would now play a key role in more of a casual, more of an informal kind of occasion. Does that mean that you can't wear the original for a formal event or for date night? No, you can definitely wear whatever you want, when you want, and how you want. I'm just telling you that this one is really not redundant if you own the OG, as long as you loved the OG, which we're going to talk about more in a minute. I'm sure that another question that you will have for me is, which one do I prefer? Which one of the two is my favorite? And I really can't answer that question because, again, to me, it would be comparing like apples to oranges. They're not the same. They're truly not the same. Not in the note structure. The scent is pretty much, kind of like the same. I know that I'm not making sense in telling you all this, but this is exactly how I feel. While the scent is very, very similar and you're pretty much going to get a very similar scent, very, very similar scent, there are differences that I pick up clearly on my skin. So for me, they are not the exact same fragrance, but I think that what makes the biggest difference for me and why I can't pick one over the other is because for me, this one is perfect for a more of a special occasion where I do not want that screechiness and that very powerful powderiness and sweetness and even vanilla intensity that you find in the OG. Another question that I'm sure you will have for me is, will you enjoy this one if you did not like the original? For me, if you did not like the original, most likely you're not going to enjoy this one because this one takes, again, certain notes and emphasizes them, intensifies them, makes them even more present, and adds additional notes that, to me, kind of like amplify the overall vibe of the original scent. So when you talk about that tonka, when you talk about the musk, and when you talk about that coconut, you are definitely going to be getting a more intense, to call it something, version of the original, bringing out certain accords and tonalities that you did not get in the OG. So if you did not enjoy the OG, I would just say that maybe this is a scent profile that you do not enjoy. So best case would be, what I would recommend is that you try this one before picking it up. I would not blind buy it if you did not enjoy the original. So even though I am telling you that this one is smoother and maybe you just didn't like the screechiness of the original, I still think that because you didn't like the original, it is best that you get yourself a sample and or decant and try it on skin before committing to a full bottle. Now, if your question is, which one should you pick up first? If you are a fan member that really enjoys all of the notes, accords, and potential tonalities that I've mentioned today, like if you really are a musk-based fragrances lover, if you do enjoy the note of tonka, if you really don't mind a powdery kind of coconut, not creamy, the coconut here is powdery, it's dry, it's flaky. What is creamy, what makes that creamy scent at the dry down is really more a function than the vanilla, in my opinion, than of the coconut. I don't get creamy coconut in this fragrance, but then I don't get creamy coconut in any of the two. So if you are okay with the notes and you are a lover of those accords, then I think that this is very much a safe blind buy. And if I had to pick which one to start with, I would definitely start with this one versus the original because of its smoothness and refinement. Not that I'm saying that the OG was not refined. No, the OG is refined, but this one takes it, in my opinion, definitely to the next level. And then, of course, I'm sure some of you will ask me, could you make this your signature scent? Absolutely. I think you can actually make this one or the OG your signature scent. It depends on what you prefer, the level of intensity, the level of note presence, the accords that are present, everything that I've explained. Just keep in mind that the original is definitely much screechier, less refined, less smooth, but a beautiful, beautiful fragrance. All in all, I really think that this is a solid release coming from Matiere Premier, and I think that it is the next fragrance or flanker that made sense following the OG. I think that Matiere Premier really did launch this fragrance in response to some of the concerns that, we expressed around the OG. The level of powderiness, the very screechiness nature, to call it something, of the fragrance. That has all been mitigated in this fragrance and then some, because the removal of the heliotrope and the addition of the tonka has taken this fragrance, in my opinion, the scent profile to the next level and have given us a fragrance that could very well be the more refined, the more sophisticated version of the OG. So for me, this is a very nice and solid release, and I am really, really loving it. And I give it a 9 out of 10. All right, fam, so we have reached the end of today's review, and I hope that this was enjoyable for you. I hope that I was able to answer all of your questions around this new launch from Matiere Premier. And I have to tell you, I really think that this is a solid launch, a very, very nice flanker, to call it something, of the OG. It has been done beautifully. I think that the decisions around some of the notes that have been added and some of the notes that were removed is very, very wise and very much in response to some of our observations, upon the launch of the first one. So I think that this is a very, very nice release. Let us know if you've tried it, how you feel about it, how it performs on your skin. What are you getting compared to the OG if you are a fan of both of them? And how do you feel overall? Anyway, as always, thank you so much for hanging with me today, and I will see you all in the next video.